Now, before we go any further, chums, don't have a go at me about this door. I know many of you many of you have previously. You've said, Neil, why don't you shut that door? That's very Larry Grayson, isn't it? You have to be a certain age to know that one, don't you? Who remembers Larry Grayson? Loved him. Absolutely a brilliant, brilliant comedian. Met him briefly. Just a funny man. But no, back to the phone box. It's broken. Yeah, so every time you close it, the minute there's a bit of a gust of wind, well, there you go, it's open again. Well, I can't be doing this. Well, I'd never get a chance to do the story, would you? No. Well, you understand. Well, I'll do it at the end. Yeah, I promise, honestly. Let's get back to your royal story of the day. Many people suggest, of course, that royals are barking mad. Not me, but just the general public. And here's the reason why. As ever, let me explain. Morning, nice to see you, chums. Thank you so much for your time. Yes, I'm talking to you. I know. I just like to get these things out in the clear, you know, because I got told off last time. Neil, why haven't you closed that door? And I thought, well, hang on. Didn't realise this was my job, you know what I mean? It's annoying though, because everybody wants pictures here, as you can imagine. It's really good for tourism, and they just don't look after them at all. Filthy inside, you know, and you think, keep these windows clean, make it look spectacular, because this is going to be on the world stage, isn't it? People are going to see that and think, you know, oh, I know, don't get me going. Now, as we know, the British monarchy are animal lovers. We saw that, didn't we, recently? None more so than this beautiful picture taken by Catherine, the Princess of Wales, of her husband, His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, Prince William, with their dogs, their puppies. Aren't they lovely? You do kind of think, goodness, they are a handful, I'm sure, if you've got puppies. I know what it's like, shredding things, biting into things, and you think, stop, you know, that's my best piece, but that's the fun of it, isn't it? Truly is. Now, royals just adore animals. You know, the Queen, as we know, loved horses. She loved her corgis. Queen Camilla, a huge animal lover, and of course King Charles, both recently just got rescue dogs from a rescue home. And as I pointed out, William got battered for that, but basically, you know, it's his choice, whatever he wants to do. However, royals and dogs go back a long way. And I know I often say this on the show, but you know what's interesting, chums, is that nothing ever is truly new. You know, everything comes a full circle, because when you look back at royals and how they made, you know, animals and pets really sort of popular, was this particular lady, that's right, Queen Victoria. Now, Queen Victoria had dogs, you know, from a very early age. In particular, she loved King Charles Spaniels. I like those, don't you? It's the floppy ears, I think. That and Basset hounds, but I digress. Now, Queen Victoria was such an animal lover. She had so many dogs. And a little bit like Queen Elizabeth, they followed her around and all of that sort of stuff. And she made sure that they were fed well, and she talked to them a lot and all of that sort of stuff. One particular dog that she was very fond of was a dog called Dash. So much so that Dash became a central part to the family, her and of course Prince Albert. And then she decided, because of the children needed entertaining, that she was going to make up some adventure stories starring Dash, of course, the dog. And this became sort of folklore, and lots of royal staff backed this up at the time in their diaries, how the Queen would sit there literally just writing out a few ideas and plots, and then when it came to bedtime she would read these dog stories to her children. And I think this is lovely. You know, I think it just shows a totally different side. And more importantly, you know, as I said, she'll be having meetings, say, with Disraeli or whoever the British Prime Minister was at the time. And the dogs will be yapping around, and, you know, it's reported that he'd look down and think, is she focusing on this or focusing on the dogs? It's kind of funny to think, isn't it? I don't know if you know this, but during the audience with Queen Elizabeth and her sitting prime ministers at the time, no corgis were allowed to sit in the room until the end of the conversation. She was rather strict about that, so they're totally different in the way that they did it. However, way back in the 19th century, 18th century, basically the Queen was, you know, this got into the public domain, and she made pet keeping, dogs and cats in particular, very popular with the masses. You know, if it was good enough for the Queen, it was certainly good enough for them. And then the story was published about how she made these particular stories up for her children, and there were lots of requests that could she not make them public. The problem was that they were sort of ad-libbed, a basic outline of what Dash might do in a certain situation, but it wasn't really a story, you know. So somebody went along to see her and the courtiers and said, listen, we think there's something in this, you know, perhaps we could start to write a series of novels all about your dog, you know, and something on those lines. And this is where I find it fascinating about royal history, because it's the difference, isn't it, of the way we are now. So many people have written books about dogs, celebrities, you know, the adventures. There was even a recent cartoon, I think, made by a French company all about the corgis at Buckingham Palace. I don't know whether that ever came out, but it was an interesting sort of concept. However, Queen Victoria apparently was appalled by this and said, no, 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 this is a private matter. This is just for me and my children and, of course, the dogs themselves. And they said, well, could you have a think about it? And they said, well, where do you normally get the ideas for the stuff? And apparently, Queen Victoria would go and sit in the stables at Buckingham Palace, where all of her horses were obviously positioned, and she would sit there and apparently get inspired, jot a few notes down, and then come back with a brilliant, apparently, series of stories to entertain the children. Now, years later, when the Prince of Wales, King Edward VII, was on the throne, he thought about the idea of putting this out as a tribute. But sadly, most of the documentation, bar a few, were missing. People just burned things because they didn't want, and maybe this was the Queen's instructions, these sort of things coming out. But as I said, it's fascinating to think, isn't it, that when we live in the world today, somebody, somewhere, would have made, as we know, something of that. Queen Victoria could have made a lot of money from it because I'm sure people would have bought it, but she thought it was a little bit of a tawdry and tacky idea. What do you think? And is it a gem that we've now lost forever? I'd love to know. And as ever, please be polite, respectful, and if you can, like and share. Neil Sean in some sunshine now in the very heart of London.